That's the whole idea. And how perfect it is that today that's what is really what I'm talking about. I love how Spirit works that way. I love how God works that way. There is the title I put up. They don't usually put the title, I don't think, on the website, but I said, today I'm revealing the secrets of the S-Files. Not the X-Files, the S-Files. And when we are working in this realm, in the realm of spirit, which starts with an S, there was a whole list of words that come around. There's sacredness. There's, of course, spirituality. There is silence. There's serenity. There's the self with the big S and the little s. There's just whole lots of S words. Spirit. Sanctuary. Study. Silence. Solitude. Do you get the picture? Surrender. You just gave it away, Brooke. That's okay. That's all right. That is absolutely perfect. I surrender to the power and presence of love within me, and all is well. All is well. That is the whole thing. Thank you. I love the timing of that. There's an author named Dennis Merritt Jones in the New Thought. He's written several books, and his book, The Art of Being. Here's the quote that I want to start with. Many people shut down the minute they hear the word surrender. The word can drudge up some sort of pain or fear from a previous experience, which is often based on a concern of losing control or giving their power to another person. Surrender is about giving up control, but not to another person or any situation. The spirit within has no need to garner our personal power because it is already all-powerful as well as all-knowing. With this in mind, rather than praying in utter desperation, like, God, show me the way out of this mess, we might actually pray, God, show me the way in to a deeper communion with Source, trusting that from that deeper place of knowing, we are always gently led where we need to be. This, then, is divine surrender. I just want to acknowledge, before I get any further, because before it gets out of my mind, that part of that surrender, part of what's bringing this to mind, if you're familiar, there were some massive fires over by Grayling yesterday, if you're wondering where the smoke came from that was blowing from the east to the west. And I was thinking about this morning, of this idea of surrender. Clearly, we don't just let it burn. We do our human part of this process to keep life and property and things safe. But in the grander scheme of things, it's a great example of the flame-ups, as it were, in our lives, where our idea, or we think we have to control. I'm already off where I was going, but that's okay. That's how it works. That's how it works. If you think about forestry management, there are things called controlled burns, with parameters, with things around them, knowing that at any given moment it could jump and it could turn into something pretty disastrous for us. So the idea here is that we have this thing that eventually, with our surrender, the bottom line around surrender is balance. The thing that comes to mind as well is, and this popped in this morning, was how many kayakers, canoers, paddling, boating people are there? And yes, I see some hands. Or maybe you used to be. Doesn't mean you're going to have to go out and do it today. But you know the idea is, if you think about being in a canoe with spirit, you're going down, merrily down the stream. And the rocks are coming. And what do? We start panicking, freaking out sometimes. Some of us, with practice, know that we have to have some balance, okay? If we're we're out on a bigger body of water, and this is one of those places, if you were ever, the first time canoeing that you canoed with someone, oh, Oh. I have a story. When I lived in Georgia, there was a young newly married couple that had never been canoeing before. First of all, they had to decide who was going to sit in the back, who was going to sit in the front. And it was a day on the river, and they brought their picnic basket, they brought all of these things, and we were watching them going. None of it's in plastic bags. They've got all, and this was years ago. Okay, thankfully before really cell phones, because they didn't. But their dynamic of who was going to control, because they weren't familiar with the process. They weren't familiar that you have to work as a team. They weren't familiar that one's got a paddle on one side and one on the other. The idea is that they would both paddle on one side and they'd start going this way, and then they would both switch to the other side and go that way. And they turned over I don't know how many times, and we helped them get upright and get the water out of their canoe and all of those things. But this is the idea of surrender, when at some point they wanted to quit and go home, but we still had another couple of hours on the river before we were going to get picked up by the bus. And it was an interesting phenomenon to observe. And we do that with spirit all the time. Do we not? Well, I'll just admit that I do. Not all the time so much anymore, but I still get activated by something, some old belief, something in me that says, I'm not in control. I'm not in control anymore. I was having a discussion with somebody just a couple of days ago about this, and we can laugh about it now. But it's that idea, when you learn that you really don't have any control over anything, that is huge surrender. But what he talks about, Dennis Barrett Jones, is that same idea. And when I looked up the word surrender there's a database, topics around or quotes around surrender. It's pages and pages and pages long, from Buddhism to Christianity to everything else in spiritual teachings, in philosophy. The idea of letting go to something larger than ourselves. And always and always and always, when we do that, when we loosen our grip, our death grip, is when we open to the creative solutions of the infinite intelligence and the infinite love. It's these places in our lives that stuff happens. Stuff happens. And it's our reaction to it, it's our response to it that determines our experience going forward. I was working with a minister very early in my spiritual training and spiritual path and journey. And that song, All Is Well, it was an affirmation that he gave me, because he recognized how many, without coming right out and saying, Kit, you're trying to control everything. He said, I'm going to offer you this mantra. I'm going to offer you this prayer, and say it as many times and as many times and as many times as you need to when you feel like anxiety and you get stressed and everything's tensed up. And it was, I surrender to the power and presence of God within me, and all is well. And I think probably for about 3 to 5 to maybe longer years, that was a mantra, like every, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just to get myself centered and grounded. And I had worked with him for a couple of years when it was starting to gel, like, oh, the God within me. The love within me, the peace within me, the power within me, the joy within me. I can surrender to that, because that's where the solutions lie. It's that place in life that Thomas Edison talked about, living in the land of the solution. There's a story that goes around, if you've been to Greenfield Village and the Henry Ford Museum, however many filaments that Edison used until he got it right. What he would do is he would sit in his chair in the lab, and he would sit with a rock in his hand, in the arm, and he'd have a bucket down by his foot. And he would go into basically meditation, but he called it going into the land of the solution. He knew that there was something larger that would have the answer to this. And he had the rock in his hand, so if he happened to fall asleep, it would drop out of his hand and hit the bucket and wake him up, right? Talk about a focused meditation, right? But here's the thing, it's going into expecting that there is an answer in the infinite intelligence that we live in. It is there. We just have to, like I said, let go of the death grip to go into the land of the solution and recognizing, honoring, embodying, embracing, accepting that we have a God within us. We have that divine spark within us. We have that piece of that intelligence. We are a part of the one mind. All of the creativity opens up. It seems counterintuitive. Another thing that comes to mind is also what's happened. How do I get on talking about living in Georgia? Had a new house, my partner at the time. It was a brand new build house, and it was a spec kind of, cookie cutter home. And they didn't really grade the property very well. They threw up the house and, built them like there's 6 done in a week kind of thing. And they didn't grade the backyard. And in Georgia, you get these torrential rain thunderstorms. And it was coming down the hill, and it's all that red dirt and red clay, and it's pooling at the back door. So in my infinite controlling wisdom, I decided that renting a bobcat to do the work ourselves would be a great idea. Not ever having driven a bobcat before. And the intuitive part, or the practiced mental thing, when you're driving a car or you're riding a bike, you're gripping the wheel, or you're gripping the handlebars, and you turn the direction that you want to go. So your body and your mind are used to doing this. And you're laughing because some of you I know probably have driven bobcats. It's opposite. If you want to go forward, you push forward. If you want to stop, you pull back. So it's like if you think about riding a bike and you want to stop, you're like, oh, I'm going to hit something, I'm going to pull back. Well, it goes wonky. And it turns in very odd ways, and the turning is not a wheel, it's these wacky things. And I nearly flipped it. And after I'm in control, I know how to do this kind of stuff. I said, and when I almost went that way up the hill and over, I said, I'm done. I surrendered to the fact that I didn't know what I was doing. And I had to ask for help. And I had to find somebody. And all of that energy that I expended thinking I knew better could have killed me. And probably a few other people and some other things, and it would have cost a lot of money to have ruined that bobcat. That's the example. It's a great visual, right? But we do that day in and day out. There's a sense that we have, and especially in Western culture, of that independent, I can do this myself, I know better than, and I'm going to try. Here, hold my beer, watch this. Right? And it never really turns out well, does it? YouTube and TikTok isn't a testament to that, right? But it's such a simple solution. There's that S word, that simple solution. When we're shaking our fists at spirit, when we're in the middle of a dark night of the soul, thinking we have to know, we have to know, we have to know. Well, if we knew, we would do it. Rumi has Rumi, who in very few words can say what I can say in 45 minutes, just said, how about trying something new? Surrender. It's really that simple, and really not, is it? To give up control, as it talks about. But we are not giving up control. We're not laying ourselves down to be a doormat for somebody saying, oh, I don't know, I can't do it. We have our part to do in it as well. We can let go of all of the how of things. I had an extraordinary experience that I would like to say that one of those things that practice made progress this last week was some things that I was releasing on Craigslist. And it's a long, much longer story than for this time, but the gist of it was, the work that I had to do in mind was, the first thing was I posted this thing and immediately started pulling back saying, I'm asking too much money for that. I said, that's not the case. What do I want? What would I love? I had to know the what. And I went back and forth, and then I had somebody that I know in Manistee who's very knowledgeable about these kinds of things, and he said, don't compromise on that. This is a really valuable thing that you have. Don't compromise on the price. I said, okay. And I kept trusting of everything else that was going on, and I kept hearing these little, well, this and that and the other thing, and I stopped. I had to stop, consciously stop and say, okay, what would I love in this situation? I want to release this. It has served me well. It's time to let it go. It's time to go to the next thing. I had to do the same thing with my thoughts. These old fear-based, worry-based, twisty things that make me anxious did not do anything but create more anxiety, more worry, more doubt. That's how it works. What we resist persists. You've heard that. And so it was just a week ago, last Sunday, I sat down in my journal. I sat down with intention. I sat down with clarity. What would I love? I want to release this, and I want it to be a win-win for everybody. And I left it. I surrendered it. I actually felt myself physically let it go and say, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It's going to be the perfect outcome. Monday morning, I'm in my spiritual practice, and I keep getting this little thing that says, look at your email, look at your email, look at your email. I'm like, no, I'm in the middle of my spiritual practice. I'm not going to look at my email. I'm busy. But I stopped because I was getting the answer that I needed. And I got an email, and there was an exchange, and there was an exchange, and there was an exchange. And by Wednesday, actually by Monday night on the holiday, this person that was interested in this thing that I was selling said, can I hire you to consult with me about this? I said, absolutely. And by Wednesday, sight unseen, I said, we'll take the whole thing. How do you want us to pay for it? We'll give you half down. I said, I'm all right with that. That kind of why I bring this up is that balance, and that's what we're talking about. We started talking about balance. Is we've got to do our work. I do my work consistently and daily, and sometimes minute by minute. As I said, I surrender the power and presence of God with me, and all is well. I surrender the power and presence with me, and all is well. That's how I started that. And now it rolls after all these years. When I find myself feeling a catch in my gut, I surrender the power and presence of God within me. I know it all is well. I trust, and everything is working out in my favor. We have to do our part. Let God take the heavy lifting. All of the connecting the dots, that's not up to me. But the surrender is so. I'm watching. I have coaching clients that I'm watching this happen with, too. And the moment that they get, I have to let go. And the doors start flying open of opportunity and quote-unquote miracles in their lives. And to see them light up, to see the faces of people like, I get it. I get what happens when I let go and I trust. And I trust and I trust and I trust and I wait. and I breathe, and I do with what I have in front of me. And I had to do a lot of that last week too, was what do I have in front of me? What can I do right now? With my intention was, what can I do? This was the important part too. What can I do in the next 24 hours to move the energy around this? I didn't expect it to come in the form of an email. I didn't expect it to come in the form of an email that was interrupting my spiritual practice. But I got it because I said, I just asked for this last night. What can I do in the next 24 hours to move this along? And there it was. So letting go, surrendering, and the simplicity. Try something different. Surrender, as Rumi says. Marianne Williamson from A Return to Love says, until your knees finally hit the floor, you're just playing at life. And on some level, you're scared because you know you're just playing. The moment of surrender is not when life is over, it's when it begins. There's a whole nother talk about the Wizard of Oz and all the metaphysical meanings in the Wizard of Oz, but the very one that applies today is the part where Dorothy is on her journey and she's got all her pals and they're heading to Oz, and at some point the Wicked Witch flies through the sky and says, surrender, Dorothy. Now we think of that, of course, in the context of the film, that she's supposed to just give up. And if she gives up, the witch is going to kill her because she killed her sister and took the shoes and all that business. But the metaphysical part of that was, surrender, Dorothy. Surrender the idea. Yes, you're on this journey, but surrender that you think you know how it's going to end, because somebody promised you that if you got to Oz, Oz would help you and you could go home to Kansas. But the surrender, the metaphysical part of that was, let go of this idea that you know how this is going to happen. And in the end, the wizard didn't do squat for her. That kind of surrender is giving up our power to someone else, to someone else's belief, to someone else's idea of what is right for us. True surrender, spiritual surrender, is giving up the idea and letting God show us. Align us, help us realign with our path. Yeah, it's cool stuff. So Ernest Holmes, founder of Science of Mind, says we can awaken to the living presence of the eternal God within each one of us and enter into a realization of peace and joy. As we come to surrender all the littleness, fear, and doubt, the river of life flowing from the mind of God will renew our vigor, remake our strength, ennoble our being, heal our bodies, and bring peace to our hearts. So I invite you to consider, to be willing to practice some surrendering. The next time you feel yourself going into worry, doubt, fear, lack, limitation, try something different. Surrender. Let go and let God. That's what it's all about. Thank you and namaste.